They told you to be a bit delusional to get what you want. And in some ways, you need to be. But babes, without what I'm sharing with you today, it might backfire. Hello, my loves. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Lorena, and I'm a somatic self-concept and identity coach. And I help women to bridge the gap between who they currently are or see themselves as and who they desire to be or become, so that you can break repetitive cycles in your life, outdated patterns, and get rid of identities and attachments that no longer serve you, so that you can step into and create the reality that you are truly here to live and experience. So let's talk about manifestation, or creating your reality, and the advice to be delusional in order to get what you want. Now, I already have a whole video about why not to be delusional, because it's not always the best idea. But today I want to talk about when it actually is the right call and what you need to ensure so that you can use your delusion in a healthy and powerful way, rather than in a way where it keeps you stuck in a loop. Now, this whole concept of being delusional, or delulu, has been popularized a lot over the last few years. I believe that is TikTok's fault. And in some ways, the idea of being delusional makes complete sense, right? If you want to create something in your reality that is currently not existent, you need to be a bit insane. Of course, you have to be a bit delusional. You have to go beyond what your senses tell you. You have to stop just looking at what you're seeing outside of yourself and taking that as evidence for what is not possible. You need to think outside the box, right? Because it's not yet here, and you're attempting to live from a reality that's not yet in existence. That's always delusional to an extent. And I always encourage my clients to dream big, bigger than they think is possible, to really believe in the unseen. I do a lot of work with them on really believing with every fiber in their being, creating a conviction in their entire system, their entire body, their entire being, that what they want, that what they desire, even if it feels impossible, can and will actually become a tangible reality. But some of the advice that has become really popular around the idea of being delusional is just stuff that might feel good in the moment, but doesn't actually work long term. And of course, you get hooked by it, because imagining something that you want, fantasizing about something, gives you a dopamine hit. It makes you feel good momentarily, and it probably just takes you out of the pain of the reality that you're currently finding yourself in. And when I say pain, that can be something really intense, but it can also just be this flavor of something is lacking, something is missing in my life, or I know I want more, or I feel like I'm settling. After all, there's a reason you want to change it. And the reason you get a desire in the first place is often because there's something in your experience that you do not like, or that you no longer want to repeat. But fantasizing and imagining isn't actually really grounded in how manifestation really works. Manifestation, at least the way I teach it and the way I see it and the way it lasts long term, isn't wishful thinking. And a lot of the advice around being delusional is based on the premise that imagination creates reality, right? That is one of Christian mystics Neville Goddard's famous concepts. But it doesn't mean that just ignoring your current reality and creating delusion or living in your imagination is magically going to change it. It's the initiation to it, and I'm going to get into how you can use it powerfully so that it actually does change your reality. But that's why there are a few reasons why I usually speak against the idea of being delusional. So I want to touch on those reasons first, before I tell you when it actually is a good idea to be delusional. Okay, so why do I usually speak against the idea of being delusional? Let your delusion inspire you, right? Take it as inspiration, dream freaking big. But then we also need to know how to effectively deal with the external reality, the mirror that surrounds you. And what I see a lot in the spiritual and in the manifestation community is a ton of spiritual and emotional bypassing. That can look like flipping your thoughts, fighting your own brain. It can look like affirming your way, or attempting to affirm your way into a new reality. a reality that doesn't yet exist. So you're trying to make yourself believe something that you don't actually believe. And of course, there's this advice to just be delusional. Now, if you use the advice to be delusional in a way where you're ignoring everything that you're currently seeing and experiencing, it can quickly become toxic, and it can also feed into trauma. If you've been stuck in a loop of visualizing, affirming, hoping, and then crashing back down into frustration or shame, this might be why. Because what do you do when you shut down your beliefs? You shut down your emotions and you shut down the truth of what you're actually feeling. You repress it all. It doesn't go away just because you ignore it. When you repress what you're feeling and believing, it has to go somewhere. Now, where does it go? It goes deep into your subconscious. It goes into your body, right? If you hold on to a lot of emotional charges that are repressed inside of you, you might feel this in your body. You might feel this even physically in the form of back pain or getting ill often or just chronic stress, chronic anxiety. That can sometimes be a bodily response to repressed emotions and repressed trauma. Or if it doesn't manifest inside of you, inside of your physical being, it might manifest externally. Now, by that, I mean your external reality. That's when you find yourself in repetitive cycles, experiencing the same dynamics, the same patterns, the same things, the same events again and again in different forms or slightly different manifestations. Or repressed emotions can also manifest in impulsive reactions, right? You might get triggered really easily or become really reactive and then later on think, why did I do that? Maybe this is why. So that's why women often wonder why they do everything right by living in the end, but things are getting worse or they just don't change. I don't believe in toxic positivity. I don't believe in just bypassing the truth of what you're feeling, and I don't believe in bypassing your darkness. Yes, of course we want to be optimistic, we want to be positive, but we also need to address when we're not. We also need to address what's underneath, because otherwise this delusion is not something that's inspiring. It's not something that's empowering and that moves you forward. It's then denial. It's then you pushing things into your subconscious. Fears, emotional charges, unwanted thoughts and beliefs. And whatever you push into your subconscious goes into your shadow. Your shadow is the part of you that you repress, that you deny, that you hide, that you don't want to look at, that you don't want others to know about, that you don't want to feel. But that part, your subconscious, is exactly what you manifest from. You don't manifest from your conscious mind. You manifest from what's in your subconscious. Let me know if you've ever tried to live in the end, but then you just ended up feeling more disconnected or more frustrated than before. Share it in the comments if you have, because I know that's where I started many years ago. So why do so many people get stuck when they're trying to be delusional? So a lot of women get stuck because they live in fantasy land. Fantasy is not how you create your reality. Fantasy is fantasy. You can dream about a future that never happens all day long. Many people have dreams that they never fully act on or that they never have come to fruition because they just fantasize about it. Unless you actually, and here we're getting to something, unless you actually feel and embody that desire, it will remain a fantasy. And miracles are freaking possible. I mean, it depends on what your perception of a miracle is, but things can actually present themselves to you. Opportunities can just flock to you. I have a free masterclass about this. It's called Magnetic, and it's all about becoming magnetic to the reality that you desire so that you don't have to try so hard. I'm gonna link it below. But most women are not actually embodied when they go into their desire, when they go into imagining it or feeling into it even. There's still like a distance there. Maybe they tap into the state or the feeling briefly, but they can't sustain it. Believing in what's not yet here requires you to actually feel the possibility and feel the reality of it in your bones, not just play pretend. The women who get stuck also often haven't dealt with the emotional charges underneath. Now, remember how I said if you visualize and bypass your emotions, they're gonna get depressed. Now, most of us have been doing that our whole lives in some way, shape, or form because it's really hard to sit with these emotions or process these emotions properly. So we all carry repressed things unless we deal with them. So these emotional charges underneath that I'm talking about can be trauma from the past. It can be shame and guilt about the desire. It can be fear of failure, fear of it not happening, fear of judgment from other people. And if you don't deal with these emotional charges underneath, guess what? They'll persist, no matter how much you're trying to avoid them by living in delusion. So then what ends up happening is that being delusional temporarily feels good because it gives you some relief. It gives you hope, it gives you possibility. Not bad things per se, but you keep getting frustrated because eventually old patterns, old emotions, an old reality will resurface. This is what so many of the women that I work with in Recreate Yourself struggle with before they reach out to me, before they come to work with me. They often have been going in circles for months or years because they've tried to layer beliefs on top of what was already there. That's either because that's what they've been told in the self-concept and manifestation space by other people or by other coaches. Sometimes it's because they had a lot of therapy and they created a lot of awareness around their patterns, but they didn't have the resolution. That can sometimes happen with therapy. Or maybe they just try to do it all on their own, which is a lot of pressure for you and your system. And then naturally you keep going back and forth. Now, of course, that's frustrating after a while, but there are situations where I do advise you to be delusional. So when should you be delusional? You can be delusional with the reality that you're wanting to create and step into when you know how to deal with the emotions that are repressed in your subconscious. That is easier said than done because the subconscious is by very definition not conscious. So this is not something that any of us can access very easily. In fact, that's always where I advise to get support. That's where I get support from my mentors, from my coaches. That's what I help my clients with. In Recreate Yourself, a lot of the process, a lot of the work we do is about bringing these repressed emotions and also these repressed beliefs and patterns to the surface and healing and integrating them. We resolve them at the root. Now, that doesn't mean you need to be perfectly fully healed. That's never going to happen. As long as you're human, you're going to be on a journey, right? You're going to be healing, you're going to be learning, you're going to be making experiences. It doesn't mean that you can't manifest until you're healed, right? That's not what I'm saying. But you need to know how to process them. Not just sit with them, by the way, but actually process and transmute them. And for those of you who don't know, because I've mentioned it a few times now, Recreate Yourself is a self-concept coaching program, right? It's not about manifestation specifically, but it does have strong flavors of manifestation in it. And that's because changing your self-concept, stepping into a new identity, will have an impact on your external reality also. As much as it's about the inner work and your inner state, you also have physical desires that you want to make manifest, and that's absolutely fine. But I only ever give my clients tools to actively manifest when they've dealt with a lot of the repressed emotions in their psyche. Once we've dealt with and integrated their hidden shadows, once their nervous system is in a healthy and stable place, and once they have the tool and the process and the support to really regulate, navigate the emotions that might arise newly or that might come to the surface from the past, that foundation needs to be set first. And speaking of the nervous system, by the way, that's another prerequisite for being delusional in a successful way. You want your nervous system to have the capacity to actually let that reality, as delusional as it is, to let it in and to hold it. Because that's going to be scary for your nervous system. That's going to feel unfamiliar. It's not going to feel safe. You might go into survival responses. You might block and resist the very things you want unconsciously. That's a big, big reason why women tend to go back and forth in their state, because their nervous system and their body don't actually have the capacity to receive and hold a reality that feels out of the ordinary, that feels delusional. Creating receptivity, not just in your conscious mind, but in your body, is very, very important. And that's when you get to have fun with your imagination. Basically, you can be delusional when you've got the foundation in your self-concept already. You don't create the foundation in your self-concept by being delusional or by imagining something different. You don't create your self-concept by just visualizing it, right? You can visualize yourself to be more confident than you are. You can visualize yourself to be chosen when you actually feel abandoned. But you need to do the emotional integration, the nervous system work, and the embodiment work to shift your self-concept first. And that's when we can play. That's when we can play with the magic. I like to see this as a difference between delusion and what I like to call embodied visioning. Yeah, we need to be a bit delusional, right? Like I said in the beginning, I invite you to have big freaking goals and desires. Make them impossible. Make them big enough so that people around you will think you're absolutely cuckoo. So that people around you think you're absolutely out of your freaking mind. That's when you're onto something, in my opinion. Especially if it's a desire that feels really true to you or your soul. A desire that persists no matter what you freaking do. But that delusion needs to be grounded in your body. It needs to feel real to you and not just to your mind. It needs to be a felt reality. I like to call this embodied visioning because it's not just something that you're dreaming of. You are creating a vision here, but it has roots. It has a foundation. It's fully integrated inside of you. You become the vision. And that's when delusion is no longer delusion. It's just the reality that you're living from, even when things outside of you have not yet shifted. Your vision should be big. Your vision should not make sense, but you need to be able to hold it. That's when you're no longer trying to be delusional. You're just living your truth before the world catches up. Let me know how all this lands with you. Share it in the comments. And next week, we're going to have a video where we dive deeper into embodiment because there's a lot of misconception when it comes to embodiment and how to embody a new self-concept. So stay tuned for that and I'll see you next week.